Once my dad, who works in a factory, canceled the engagement right after my stepmom said so. She, being quite mean, threw tea on my dad's face while laughing like crazy. Surprisingly, my stepdad didn't scold her. The tea stain spread on the suit my dad had specially cleaned for the occasion. But luckily, the tea was just lukewarm, so no burns. I handed a napkin to my dad, and Tom, panicking, tried to clean the suit. Despite worrying about injuries, Tom couldn't help but laugh at his parents' behavior. During this chaos, my dad, without saying anything, stood up straight, pointed at them, and declared he would ruin their company. In a voice I'd never heard before, he took my hand, and we left the chaotic scene behind. Tom apologized to my dad and quickly followed us, but my dad, gravely, said there's no need. I'm Yvonne Warner, a 26-year-old office worker, with a bit of a family situation. My mom passed away when I was little, and my dad raised me alone. He worked at a factory, but never missed any of my school events. In college, I dated Tom, who was 2 years older. Tom was gentle and polite, but there was some conflict with his parents. Despite that, I continued dating him, proud of how he put me first. I wanted to introduce him to my dad and see their reactions. When we bumped into my dad on a date, there was a mix of fear and excitement. Tom nervously introduced himself to my serious-looking dad. Tom, looking tense, bowed deeply and greeted my dad. My dad, happy to accept, smiled warmly and started chatting with him. So, you're Yvonne's boyfriend. Don't be so nervous. Take good care of her, okay? My dad reassured Tom. Yes, I'll do my best. Thank you, Tom replied. As they kept talking, Tom relaxed, and they got along well. I was relieved to see the two important men in my life getting along. I had been worried about what if my dad didn't like Tom. We couldn't spend much time as my dad had work, so we parted ways after saying goodbye to Dad. Turning back to Tom, who looked dazed, I asked if there were any problems. Suddenly, he got excited, asking, "That was really your dad, right?" Puzzled by his odd question, I answered without hesitation, "Yes, that's my dad." "Why? What's up?" Right. That's what I thought," Tom said, crossing his arms and deep in thought. I grew curious and asked him what he was pondering. His vague response left me unsettled, and he evaded any further questions. Even though he said he liked my dad, I started to worry. What if he actually didn't? It made me anxious. A few days later, Tom called me for an important talk. Nervous about our last meeting with my dad, I went to the meeting place, a cafe. Tom was already there, and I could see his gloomy face through the glass. My anxiety deepened, but I decided to act cheerful anyway. As I entered and informed him of our meeting, I approached him slowly. Tom, deeply sighing, was startled when I tapped him on the shoulder. "Well, Yvonne, you scared me," Tom said, holding his chest with wide eyes, taking a deep breath when he saw me. I was surprised by how startled Tom was. He seemed deeply troubled. Sitting across from a still gloomy Tom, I ordered from the waiter. My anxiety grew as Tom's face remained downcast. I really wanted him to pour out everything on his mind, so I spoke up. "Hey, Tom, what's bothering you so much? Is there something wrong about my dad?" When I asked this, Tom quickly looked up and immediately denied it. "Absolutely not. I actually respect your dad. It's just my. He trailed off and looked down again. I sighed. It seemed like I had to pry it out of him. I asked directly, "If you're worried about something, I want to know what's on your mind." Tom took a deep breath as if making up his mind and started to talk. "Actually, there's something I want to tell you about my parents. It's a bit of a long story, but I need you to hear it all." The story Tom told was quite shocking. According to him, his parents lack class and only judge people by their educational background and job. They've been horrible to him, constantly interfering in his life. When he introduced a girlfriend, they'd criticize her on the spot and send her away. The girls would end up breaking up with him in tears. That's why Tom wanted to marry me but was worried because of his parents. I told him there's no need to worry. We don't have to involve his parents in our marriage. Just bear with them during the wedding formalities. My dad seemed to like Tom, so what's the problem? I don't mind about that. It's okay. My dad liked you, so don't worry. Really, that makes me happy. When I first met your dad, I was surprised how different he is from my own parents. I thought that if I married Ivan, I'd become the son of such a great man. But getting married means my parents become your parents too, and I couldn't decide. Tom brightened up when I said my dad liked him but soon sighed deeply. However, Tom seemed to have an idea and looked up, apologizing. When we go to meet my parents for our marriage, can we have your dad come too? I want them to see there are such respectable people around. It might not change them right away, but I hope it does. Okay, I'll talk to my dad about it, but I wish you had talked to me about this in a different way. Oh, sorry. I'll do it properly from now. Tom suddenly realized, hurriedly and properly proposing marriage to me. After receiving Tom's proposal, I quickly decided to talk to my father about it. Initially hesitant, my father agreed when Tom came to formally ask for my hand in marriage. Then Tom and I set a date to meet his parents. On the day of the visit, all dressed up, we stood at the front door of Tom's family home, meeting Tom's parents for the first time. After hearing such stories, I was understandably nervous. My father, trying to lighten the mood, laughed and encouraged us. No need to be so tense. Tom's parents are just a bit overly concerned. Be confident. Feeling reassured by my dad's pat on the back, my nerves eased slightly. As it was time, Tom rang the doorbell, but there was no sound. We even wondered if they were not home. In a slight panic, Tom rang again, but still, there was no response. Not wanting to make a bad impression in front of my father, Tom excused himself and went inside first. My father and I exchanged glances and waited silently for Tom. Soon, Tom came out looking flustered. Before I could ask what happened, Tom began making excuses with a forced smile. Sorry, there was a bit of a delay, but please wait. We'll be ready soon. And with that, he went back inside. My father sighed in exasperation, and I felt increasingly worried. Inside, this incident might even jeopardize our wedding plans. My father isn't short-tempered, but he dislikes dishonesty, so I couldn't help but consider the worst-case scenario. Lost in these thoughts, finally, Tom came out and awkwardly invited us in. Inside, his parents were waiting. But their demeanor was odd. His mother greeted us with a sly grin, while his father looked away disinterested. We were led to the living room, but the tea served was hastily prepared and lukewarm. Despite Tom's silence and the tense atmosphere, I decided to push through with the introduction. Tom, regaining his composure, introduced my parents, and at the same time, he introduced us as well. Feeling the warmth of Tom's thoughtful introduction of both my father and me equally, our hearts were filled with gratitude. However, his parents sneered at the introduction, and in the next moment, his mother's hand reached for a teacup. Factory working father, let's call off the engagement, she said. As soon as she said that, my mother-in-law splashed tea on my father. My father-in-law, who was smiling and giggling next to her, did not blame my mother-in-law for her actions. The stain on the suit my father had specially cleaned for this day spread quickly. Fortunately, the tea that was thrown at my dad was lukewarm and almost cold, so there was no worry about burns. Shocked, I offered my dad a handkerchief while Tom panicked, wiping off my dad's suit. Tom, worried about injuries, got angry at his parents who only laughed in response. Meanwhile, my dad said nothing but stood up and pointed at them, saying, "Then I'll ruin your company," speaking in a voice I'd never heard before. He took my hand, and we left the Oak Corner house behind us. Tom's voice scolded his parents, then quickly followed us. "Father, mother-in-law, I'm really sorry. I'll have my parents apologize later," Tom pleaded. "No need. We're done with them anyway," my dad said, gravely patting Tom's shoulder. We went back to our house with Tom, and my dad immediately changed clothes. During that time, Tom was earnestly apologizing outside my dad's room, and I could hear my dad's troubled voice occasionally. However, I was too shocked by what Tom's parents had done to pay attention. I knew they wouldn't be easy to get along with, but I didn't expect such behavior. I was furious that they insulted my dad. Sitting on the living room sofa, clenching my fists, I replayed the event in my mind. It wouldn't help the situation, but I couldn't help it. When my dad finished changing, he and Tom came into the living room. Tom immediately apologized to me, almost bowing down. "Yvonne, I'm really sorry. I never expected them to do such a thing, especially to insult your dad. I'm truly sorry. I did something terrible," Tom said, clearly knowing it wasn't something easily forgiven. His sincerity was evident as he didn't even ask for forgiveness. That meant I had to apologize to Tom as well. I took Tom's hand as he kneeled on the floor and apologized. "I'm sorry too. I should not have suggested it without knowing everything. I didn't expect things to turn out this way." Then I turned to my dad and apologized with all my heart. "Dad, I'm sorry this happened because of my thoughtless suggestion." My dad just looked down, troubled, and shrugged his shoulders. It was hard for him to say anything. None of us expected this outcome, but that meant my dad's threat was serious. I decided to ask him about it. "Dad, was what you said true? Are you really going to ruin their company?" To my question, my dad glanced at Tom and then nodded firmly. "Yes, it's true. I'm going to ruin their company. Their business was already struggling, so I've been thinking about what to do. This seems like a good opportunity to cut ties." My father's eyes revealed unwavering determination. He runs an industrial company, serving as both the factory manager and CEO of a renowned top-tier local enterprise. Initially, he started as a worker in this factory, giving up his dream of becoming a painter to raise me Al. After my mother passed away, he worked tirelessly at the well-paying local factory, and his hard work was recognized with several promotions. Eventually, he caught the attention of the former CEO, also the former factory manager, who chose my father to take over the company when he decided to retire. The company expanded its business, owning various subsidiaries, and one of these subsidiaries is managed by Tom's father, my father-in-law. We discovered this during our recent visit, though ideally, my father-in-law should have realized this. Unfortunately, due to Tom's mother's premature actions, his parents' prejudices prevented this from being clarified, leading to the current situation. My father mentioned that his company was facing some management difficulties, and he was pondering what to do, considering layoffs to improve management. However, he'd rather avoid that. It was a good opportunity to decide which parts to downsize, my father said with a troubled smile, clearly reluctant to lay off any of his employees. After Tom's serious conversation with my father, he asked Tom in a low voice about his decision to close down his father's company. Tom hesitated at first, but then looked firmly at my father and replied, "I've already cut ties with them. They did something unforgivable. I think part of the consequence is paying for their actions. More than that, I want them to reflect on what happened, including this incident. But I have a request. I know it's awkward to ask at this time, but please let me get engaged with Yvonne. I know I've caused trouble with my parents, but more than anything, I want to be with Yvonne. Please forgive me." Crossing his arms, my father pondered Tom's words. It might seem inappropriate right after such an incident. However, moved by Tom's earnestness, I also pleaded with my father, "Please, Dad, I know things turned out this way, but I want to be with Tom." After hearing our request, my father hummed for a while and then shook his head as if in resignation. "If you both feel the same way, it's fine. But there's a condition. Your parents are company executives. I want to know what you plan to do with their employees. If you can't do that, your marriage is off." My father said this and sent Tom away, not even glancing at me before returning to his room. A few days later, Tom came up with a plan for his father's company's employees. He had arranged a meeting with my father, and when I returned from work at 1723, they were deep in discussion. It was apparent that Tom had written down possible job placements for all the employees and was showing it to my father. "I hope you can employ them at your company. I want to support their transition and contribute to the business's vitality," Tom said, bowing to my father. "Selfishly, I also want to work at your company. I'll work for free until they're settled and producing results." I want to compensate for any shortcomings with my work and salary. Once that's settled, I'd like to re-engage Yvonne. Tom, showing his earnestness, seemed to think that he was partly responsible for his company's collapse. He wanted to work hard to be the lubricant in this situation. I just found out that our marriage would be delayed, but it's an unavoidable circumstance. Welcome back, Yvonne. You heard right. I'm sorry for deciding such an important thing on my own, but I thought it wouldn't be fair if I were the only one happy. Yes, you're too selfish, Dad. Please let me work in the company with Tom. I'll work for free with you too. And I want you to accept Tom's proposal. As I said this, Tom tried to dissuade me, but I firmly insisted and desperately begged my father. While we were doing this, my father didn't say anything, but after repeated pleas, he uncrossed his arms and quietly nodded. Speaking of which, Tom's parents hadn't apologized yet. My father seemed to have been waiting for them for the past few days, but that period had ended. Time's up, he muttered, beginning preparations to take over my father-in-law's company. Time passed, and finally, the day came when the company collapsed. Tom's parents contacted us in protest, summoning the three of us to their home. When we arrived, the place was crowded with people protesting the company's closure. They were all former employees, angry and shouting. It seemed Tom's father hadn't explained anything to the employees. By summoning us, it looked like his parents intended to shift their failure onto us. As soon as they saw us, they pointed and started accusing. Look there, that's the root of all evil. It's not me. They're the ones who ruined the company, not me. Yes, especially that woman. She seduced our son and ingratiated herself with her father. We are victims too, so stop complaining about it. Others also vocally criticized my father and me, attempting to deflect attention away from themselves. Despite the parents' unrestrained accusations, Tom, visibly upset, tried to calm the former employees. Please wait, everyone. Yes, my father's company collapsed, but it's because of those two also. I want to help all of you who suffered unfairly with job placements. Please listen to me. Gradually, the commotion subsided, and the former employees turned their attention to us. Tom then called out each person's name, announcing their new job placements. Realizing they were not abandoned, the employees breathed sighs of relief. After announcing every employee's placement, his parents started causing a scene. Hey, Tom, what about us? Why are you ignoring us? Yes, Tom, didn't we tell you we're victims too? Tell us our job placements. If you do, we might even forgive that man and allow your marriage to that woman. Ignoring his parents' outbursts, Tom began explaining how the company went bankrupt, revealing everything despite it being an embarrassing story caused by his own parents. Tom apologized for the inconvenience caused to all of them, and thanks to a kind-hearted CEO, their jobs were secure. Please calm your anger and let's start working again from scratch, Tom addressed the employees, turning to my father and deeply bowing. I really apologize for the inconvenience caused. Thank you for listening to my selfish request. I will work with all my heart and soul. The former employees, seeing Tom's sincerity, also bowed to my father, while his parents were the only ones to object. Don't be fooled. That man ruined the company, and that woman egged him on. Wake up to reality. You're struggling for jobs because the company was destroyed, right? Just because you're getting help doesn't mean you should lose sight of the truth. Despite the parents' desperate appeals, everyone had already heard the story from Tom.